Welcome to Semi-Sages of the Pages.
Get ready,
because it's time to turn the page. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Semi-Sages of the Pages.
Woo! Welcome. I'm Morgan.
I'm Molly, and we are joined today by a wonderful guest, Stephen Lancellotti. Welcome to the podcast.
Yay!
Oh, thank you for having me. It's very nice to be asked to do something. It's nice. I'm usually ignored, so this is great.
No ignoring you today. We're really happy that you're here. Do you want to give our listeners kind of a background on who you are?
Well, I mean, I'm many things, but I'm also a writer. I started writing right after college, I guess. Like in college, I was writing short stories, and then after college, I got an internship at Michael Douglas's production company, and there I worked for. I had finished college, and then I just never left. I just stayed there because it was in Manhattan. It was a cool place to be. They needed the help, but didn't have, they couldn't hire anybody. So I worked a few days a week. And back then they actually printed the scripts. They weren't PDFs. So they had this entire script library of literally everything that Michael Douglas had ever been sent or tried to produce or whatever. So I just read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scripts and just started writing. I mean, I was always interested in writing, but that gave me the okay, I understand like the mechanics of this, And so I went to school for business. I had no schooling in writing or anything like that. And I was like, I just sort of like broke it down and realized like what I was doing. And so I just started writing and
I want to ask a question.
Oh, okay, sure.
When you were reading all those scripts, just for nerds have to know things, was there any that were like, oh my God, I read that script? Like it still sticks with you. They're like bragging rights. Do you have bragging rights?
I mean, they're not things that are necessarily hit like that people aren't exposed to, but I remember reading Red Dragon by Ted Talley, and it was one of the most amazing scripts. I know the books are amazing, but sometimes they're just not the same. But Ted Talley wrote one of the best scripts for Red Dragon. Of course, I think Brett Ratner went on to make the film, but the script was just amazing. And the other thing I remember we got the galleys for Matchstick Men. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, but the book is just mind-blowing. The movie's with Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell. It's like about like grifters and con men, and it's very well done. Like Ridley Scott did the movie, but the book was just like knock you over. It was just so awesome and dark. And of course the movie kind of lightened up the ending a little bit, but the book was just like brutal. It was and it was just something you read and you're like, wow, people can do this, like people can make this. So it was very, very exciting to see that. And then you also the writers would come in and you'd read their scripts and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then they would come in and they're like kind of like a mess. You know what I mean? So it's
just gave all of our listeners, they're like, yes. So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, well, you don't actually have to be like good at being a person. You know what I mean?
That's a relief.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't mean that in a bad way. They were just like, people were just like so neurotic and I'm just like, I was always the same. I've always been like a lunatic, but now I find that I'm even more neurotic and nervous about everything. So from there, I worked for Gene Demanian Productions, which was a film production company in Manhattan. I went over there. I had done a little internship at DreamWorks in New York, because in New York, if you can kind of there's less of those jobs, but there's less people looking for them. So they were kind of a little easier to come by. I also wrote on a movie. I was an intern and wrote on a movie for Troma, which is they did The Toxic Avenger and all these really, really crazy B movies. So I worked in, I think it was, I showed up my first day of an internship, and they're like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. They're like, you're in casting. I'm like, okay. And so all of a sudden, we were casting Toxic Avenger 4, Citizen Toxie or something. So I say or something as if I don't know the exact title. I do. That's the exact title.
That's what it was, yeah.
Yeah. So then I was in New York still, and I worked in the film production company for Gene Demanian, and there I met a producer who, she was an executive there at the time, but then branched off and made her own company. And when she was leaving, I said, hey, I got this idea. And I just like kind of pitched this idea. And she's like, yes, let's do that. And then that became this movie called The Harvest with Michael Shannon and Samantha Morton, and Peter Fonda's in it. Charlie Tahan from, if you've watched Ozark, I don't know if you watched Ozark.
Yes, I'm a huge Ozark fan.
Oh, he's Ruth's cousin, who I won't say what happens to him.
Uh-huh.
But he was just a young man at the time. He was like 12. And we did the movie. And so it was a great experience, being on the set and like having a movie made with like legitimate actors. And that kind of like was like, kind of blew my mind a little bit. So that was a lot of was
it like the moment where you're like, there's no turning back, or was the moment for no turning back before that? Like in your hero's journey, what was your point of no return with the writing?
Like the point where I think there was a chance of getting a different type of job,
right? Where you're like,
I think I think it was long before that, but like where I was like, I can't really do anything else, like because I wasn't like in school for accounting, and my brother was like, what are you doing? Like, that's, like
I'm casting for Toxic Avengers 4.
Exactly. Yeah, but it is funny because like in the moment for like a minute, it's like sort of mind blowing. You're like, I can't believe this is happening. But then it's just amazing how things like how quickly we normalize things, and it's like, oh, okay, that was just like a thing that happened now, and it's like it's just bizarre. It's just so bizarre because if I told myself, oh, you would be doing this and that, like back then, my mind would have been blown. But now it's just like, yeah, that's just stuff I do in between, like changing a diaper. You know what I mean? It's just like whatever. It's fine. Not my diaper. I don't change my own diapers. I have somebody come and do that for me.
You said you were lunatic.
Yeah, I'm mostly changing other people's diapers.
Baby.
Yes,
he's not that guy either.
Yes. Hey, the internet, you know what I mean? You get hooked up with all kinds of people. It's fine.
I mean, a job is a job.
Yeah, right.
If they're paying you.
No, I don't get paid for that.
Oh, it's just like a pleasure.
The wife
yeah.
is nice.
Yeah. Sorry. Anyways, I don't know if that's more than you wanted, but that sort of got me into the film stuff, and I was writing on, trying to write on other things, and then moving out to California, I decided that TV would be the best way. So, which is easier said than done. You know what I mean?
Are you going to tell? Because I know some of the TV shows you worked on, but
Molly, brag about him so he doesn't have to brag about himself.
Well, I can tell you the first thing I did. A friend was producing a show, and he called Shrink, which is on Peacock. Mm-hmm. And I started off as like a writer's assistant, where I was just kind of like doing stuff in the room and like help and like writing, like literally they were dictating like scripts and I was like writing them. And then I became a writer on that show, which was very nice. And if you have Peacock, it's very good. Shrink is just an excellent show. It's very, very funny. So here I went from doing all this like horror
and you're not biased at all.
No, I'm not.
Molly, that's what you
I'm
teasing.
I'm sorry.
I listen. I'm telling you, it's extremely funny, but not because of me. I mean, like all of the performers are mostly like Chicago improv comedians, and it's just a wonderful show. It really is. Yeah, if you have Peacock, it's on there right now, which is it is actually really just a great show. And then from there, I worked on Evel Knievel for Universal, which was going to be a limited series. And then literally the first day of shooting was the day the whole world shut down for COVID. So the whole thing got kind of wrapped up and put aside for a bit. I don't know if it's going to find a new life or not, but.
And how very Evel Knievel. That what happened?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was taught by his uncle.
Oh, really?
He was my college professor at Carroll College in Montana. Mm-hmm.
Really? Mm-hmm. That's hysterical. Oh, yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about Butte, Montana.
Yeah. Butte. Helena was where I went to college, and I was taught by his uncle.
Hysterical.
Small world up there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The show was like, just like, from my perspective, like the show was just it was really well done. It was really great. And it just started happening where I started like being funny. You know what I mean? Like everything I was writing before was like really, really dark. Like I wrote this script called Sandy, which is just like so dark. I mean, it's just dark. I mean, it's just bleak, you know? And then all of a sudden they were like, look, you know, I was just started like pitching jokes. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, people are laughing. So awesome. You know what I mean? Because I mean, it was like a darker sense of humor to the show, you know, because he was always like crashing or like almost killing himself or whatever. Not on purpose, but you know, he was just always doing
things
something
happen.
insane. Yeah, things happen. And then from there, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I got a call to be on the show. It became Joe vs. Carol, but it was the Joe Exotic show with Kate McKinnon, and I wrote on that for a long time, and it was just a absolutely wonderful experience. It was so great. It was so great, like during COVID, where you're like trapped, basically. You know, it was like it started. I think it started in June or something of 2020. So it was like peak COVID, where like people were still rubbing their groceries down with like alcohol wipes and stuff, you know. So
that's a part of our life. Hopefully never go back to.
I know.
And I was dying for every episode you wrote because I was glued to that series.
Oh, really? Oh, you saw it? That's great. And it was just very fun. And, you know, I was able to contribute some, you know, a lot of jokes and stuff, which I felt really good about. So I sort of like pivoted from being like this, you know, bleak and down and down writer to something, you know, writing stuff that's like a little more. Being on those two shows helped me like sort of refine like my voice in a way, because like I always knew, like I always loved dark stuff, but like I always like was in person, I was like fun, you know what I mean, but I was never fun on the page. And it sort of like helped me realize like, oh, okay, like this is more of who I am, because this is what, you know, this is people responding to this, people like this, you know, like my friends who were like in the room and stuff, who were like, oh, that's good, you know. So, and you know, like I'm a sucker for positive reinforcement. You pat me on the back, I'm like, okay, I'll do whatever you want. You like my cooking? Okay, yeah, I'll make you whatever you want all the time, forever. Anyways, it was just it actually helped like refine my voice a little bit, and I feel like a lot more comfortable in my own skin. You know, I still feel like an absolute imposter, but I feel a little more comfortable, I think, in my approach to how I write and stuff. So
I think that's something that's really going to resonate with a lot of our listeners for two reasons. One, the imposter thing. I know a lot of people feel that way.
You should.
And then
yeah.
What? I should.
No, everybody should.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
I'm only kidding. No, it's totally normal. It's totally natural. It's like the thing, you know, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But everyone feels that at one point, I think.
Well, and I think everyone goes through this evolution of like, what is my voice? How do I sound? Am I, you know, if you're novel writing, you know, am I a literary person, or am I writing middle grade, or what, you know, am I funny or that kind of stuff? And some people can change and switch, and not me, but other people like Morgan.
You're funny, because I always had friends who were like, why aren't you writing comedies? And I was like, no, I have to do this. You know what I mean?
Be dark.
But like, no, it was just sort of like where my brain went. But then you realize like, well, you can kind of have use those same muscles, but like make it funny. You know, there's a difference, you know? So, but I think that's really cool. It is interesting to pivot like in your approach to how you do things. But that being said, I always wrote tons of different things. Like I wrote an animated movie about a mule, and, you know, I wrote like, you know, tons of horror stuff and other comedy things, but they always wound up just getting really dark. So I think now that I have this like new approach, I feel pretty good.
I think that's a really good time to talk about, speaking about like on our page, all of us having all of these ideas and all of these voices, because you're talking about how, so now you feel like you've developed a darker voice, but also a more comedic voice. So you're working in and out of different genres, clearly blending pieces of those, but keeping your genre tempos consistent. So how do you decide? I know this is a huge problem for me. Like I know my voices and which genre I'm writing, but I'm sure like so many people listening, I have all these book ideas in my head that are like saying like, write me, you want to pay attention to me, you know? So how do you pick which of your voices gets attention? And then how do you keep that to a minimum so that you can keep that balance going?
Yeah. Well, for me, like some of the things just like when things start, I guess like ideas that are like solid ideas, they just keep giving. Like you think about them, you're like, oh yeah, like they just kind of the idea that kind of gives the most tends to be the thing that I'll work towards, if that makes any sense. For example, like a pilot that I just wrote, and it's like the story, the engine of the story is so giving. Because like, look, I mean, if you're doing an ongoing television series, you want like an engine to the story that's gonna help generate stories, right? Like you're gonna be like, oh, okay, like this is like, for example, like Parks and Recreation. It's like, oh, okay, like they're running like a Parks and Recreation, like, department, let's think of all of the things that can go wrong with that, and all of a sudden there's a million of them. And you're like, oh, wow, that's an idea that it's a simple idea, but it gives, it gives so much to the writers, to the performers. So for me, like when I think about what I'm going to write next, generally it all depends on like what for me, it's a little different because it just depends on what I need. Like if I'm talking to like my manager and he's like, hey, like we need like a new pilot that we have, that we can go out with, like to sort of like, to showcase your writing a little bit. It's like, okay, well then you can kind of write like whatever is really, really pulling you, like whatever is like giving the most, and makes the most sense for you. But sometimes it's like a lot of people who are, at higher levels than me, they don't write anything until they like sell the idea, they sell the pitch or whatever. And then that's basically what tells them what they're going to write for the most part. They're not like writing for fun. They're not like writing a new idea, because even if it gives, they're holding until
someone pays them.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense. But is that what we were going after? I'm sorry.
That's it's really fascinating, especially in the novel world. When you're talking about pitches, like if you write nonfiction, you can get away with pitching, and then you pitch, you write like a sample chapter, and then you wait for it to sell, and then you write the whole book. In fiction writing, unfortunately, it's a lot more work because you have to write the whole thing, and then you go out and try to sell it.
Sure.
And you can't sell it until you have the whole thing written. So you might write the whole thing and nobody wants to buy it because you picked the wrong thing to write.
Yeah. Because it's not trending right now, maybe even. Like you could have an agent say, oh, hold that for 5 years and try again.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is like, so for movies, right? Like if something would go out, it would, like I said, there was another movie that I had that was honestly going for 10 years of just like on again, off again, or whatever. And it just would never die. And it's like, you look at that and go, oh, well, it's cool that it was like still alive for a bit, but then it was dead. But like in TV, if something's dead, it's gone. It's like, forget it. It's move on. It's dead. Just don't think about it again. And you just move on, which I think is a lot healthier, because you get permission to just be like, okay, cool. I can like stop like dipping into that well, because it's just not going to happen. There's no point in going forward with it, which I think is really cool. Otherwise, things just like, they just keep going and it's a lot.
And something, oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Well, I think this is a really good segue into something we want to talk about with the industry, which was this idea of how, like in TV and movies and in books, you were talking before, Stephen, about how one of the most frustrating things is when you have this idea and you're cultivating it and then you see it done already, or it's coming out like right at the same time and you're like, oh my gosh. And I know that happened to me. I was writing a middle grade about fairies and I was so excited about it, and I had just finished it, and Disney just came out with a huge series that like looked way too much like it, and I was like, no. And it was years ago. But you're like, okay, well, there goes all that, Steve.
and sometimes you'll have an idea, and this is how we just torture ourselves. You'll have an idea and you'll be like, oh, okay, this is about like, I don't know, kickboxing or something, right? And then you're like, I have not written anything about kickboxing, but just say, right? And then you'll like look at the trades or like, you know, Deadline or like the movie news kind of stuff like that. And then they'll be like, oh, somebody, you know, something that's like not even related to kickboxing. You know what I mean? But you're like, you totally read into it and go, oh my God, that's just like my thing. That's going to be just like my thing. You know,
it's the same character going on the same, you know, story.
Yeah, exactly. We just torture, you know, that's just we just torture ourselves into thinking. But then sometimes I was saying earlier that there are times where you do actually, I'd finished a script and then a TV show came out very, very with the exact same concept. And it was just completely maddening. It just, because you just know that thing just can't go forward. It just has to die. And it's very sad. So
because you had tell them what your idea was, because I think it's so amazing what you were talking about.
Yeah. So the idea was, it was called Joe Karma, and it was like a romantic comedy about a guy whose life was just in ruins, and he didn't understand why. His therapist didn't understand why, and but then finally they get to the root of it, and it was just that he sort of bullied this girl as a kid, and so she basically was like, you know, tasked with going back and making amends in order to like move on with his life. And he gets involved with the woman's life, and it becomes like a very, very cute romantic comedy. And then I think about, yeah, it was almost like a few weeks after I finished it, I went to the movies to see Wedding Crashers, and I'm dating myself. And I went to see Wedding Crashers, and right before it was a commercial for My Name Is Earl, which was literally the exact same concept. And it just guts you. You're just like, oh, it just hurts so bad, because sometimes you're just like paranoid and you're reading the trades and going, oh, that's just like my idea. But then you look at something and you go, oh, that's just like my idea. You can't, there's no dancing around it. It's like, nope, that's it, you know. So yeah, but it's a horrible business. But it's fun. I've always said like I would do this anyway, because it's so like writing is so cathartic for me. And I know that like now I'm just like so busy with like my life that I don't get to write as much as I used to. Just like, you know, my wife was in vet school and we were out here and I didn't have any friends. I would just write, like I would just write all day. Like I just was writing all the time. And now, like, you know, life is hectic, so you just don't. But I always remember like if I was like feeling anxious or upset or sad, whatever, like it always felt better after I was done writing. Like I know people say they hate writing, they hate the process, they hate sitting down. I'm like, no, it's just like, it's so, I mean, I might not be very good at it, but it's very therapeutic. You know what I mean? It's so great to like dig into something and just escape and go somewhere else. And of course, the scripts at that time were very dark, so you're escaping into like a super dark place. But it was still fun. It was still always fun.
I completely understand what you're talking about.
And like writing horror and stuff like that, like writing stuff that is dark, you do get the opportunity to like kind of shift the tension.
Which is the perfect segue.
You're welcome.
I know. No, the question Morgan really wants to ask.
I'm like, turn that craft page, because I want to hear about how to write tension in horror.
Yeah. So I think like the more tense things are, you know, the more the audience or the reader is like dying for that to just be released in some way. And I know that like in The Harvest, the movie's very, very tense. Like Samantha Morton gives this absolutely brutal performance where she's just to give you a little background. The movie is it's about a woman and a man, you know, like a husband and wife who have a child who's very sick, and they like dote on him and they like take care of him, and you know, and they're always like, he's like home. It's very much like there was a review in Variety that said it was like Stand By Me meets Misery, and I was like, well, thank you so much, because that's exactly what I was hoping for, you know. So it has all those like those feelings to it, and she's so intense in the movie that like the littlest joke, like people in the audience were just like cackling. They were just absolutely like doubled over with like, and you're like, oh wow, like that, that was just like kind of like a funny joke, and because this neighbor moves in next door, this little girl, and she basically starts like getting involved with the kid's life, and it becomes very clear that like something's going on, like that things aren't what they seem. So you got this outside perspective, which was able to add that levity and those, and that humor, which really just like the audience was absolutely dying for, because it's so intense. If you're asking exactly how to write that, I don't know.
No, I think what I'm so interested in with tension specifically, and maybe also I'm writing a book that has high tension, so it's a big thing for me right now in my specific craft. But also, House of Dragon final finale just came out, and it worked for me. That was definitely a series that I thought worked towards the end because of the tension, because of it building and building and building and building and building, to the point that sometimes I was like, maybe I should just fast forward, because I don't know if I can handle, something bad, because it's House of Dragons, something bad is going to happen. That's like, I don't get to have a good ending, so it's so interesting. And then thinking about how many beats before they're bored, or before they can't take it, or before, because there are definitely times when I'm watching movies where I'm like, it's too long. And so I either lose my buy-in, or I'm like so on edge that it like physically almost pains me to be in the moment. And so I have to start disassociating myself. Like, I don't know, maybe it's like self-preservation or something.
Yeah, that's really funny. It also happens to me in movies that aren't like thriller movies. Did you see the movie Brooklyn? Did you see that movie? Mm-hmm. It's the sweetest movie. There's no like hint that there's something bad's going to happen, and there's no reason to believe that anything bad's going to happen. But the movie's so sweet. It's just it's a good movie. It's just like a lovely little movie. And at a certain point in the movie, you start like, everything's so like nice. You just start going, okay, look, if something happens to this girl, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, I'm going to, because like, this is such bullshit. Like, what is happening? Like she goes off with this guy to like, like on a first date and stuff. And I'm like, if something happens to her, I'm turning this movie off. Like, forget about it. I start getting so angry. You know what I mean? Nothing happens bad at all. It's just like this lovely movie, but you're attached. But and you actually, and like, as a person who's like, you're so trained to like viewers are so trained to like understand that like, wait, like we've been like, it's been good for too long. Something bad's gonna happen. Yeah, right. Yeah. You're expecting it, and you're actually like. And I don't even know if the filmmakers intended for that, but all of a sudden you're having this like visceral response to like so much niceness. You're like, something bad's going to happen,
they can't have all this nice stuff in a row. When's the turn happening?
Yeah. And it's not even like, I don't think it's not like all like rainbows and puppies. Like, I mean, she has like, she has hardships in the movie and stuff, but it's all like reasonable and manageable. It's nothing like, like a murder, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing like, there's, no one's like trying to murder her, you know what I mean? So it's all like, it's grounded real life stuff, you know what I mean? But you're just like hoping that nothing bad is going to happen to her. So
I think it's interesting that you like bring that up about like a happy movie and the importance of like genres, because the older I get, the more I'm like, no. And I see why Hallmark is successful, because you have all these women who are so stressed in their lives about their actual children's safety with really scary things, like school shootings and pandemics and like really scary things that we live through every single day. Mm-hmm. And so we want to turn something on that is safe, and when I was younger, I was like, I'm never going to be that lady. That's gross. Like, I can handle it. I'm that lady now. I'm what happened? Not always, but there are definitely days where I'm like, no, I have to have some kind of like safety. And so as a writer, it's this whole new thing that I never thought about before, which I'm reading. Have you read Donald Mass's book about emotions, the emotional spectrum?
No.
It's really cool. It talks about not just, plotting out story and not just looking at like Story Genius or the arcs of story, but looking at the reader's experience, or in your case, the audience's experience, and that their emotional reaction is more important than the emotional experiences of your characters, which I think that is what the Game of Thrones series, the books, got right. Is that it was a lot of times more about the emotion, the reader's emotional journeys with all those characters and worlds. But I just think it's interesting because when you look at tension points, back to what we were talking about, giving that humor break, that humor type of release. But when you're writing horror, you can't hold them so tight for 2 hours, or even for an hour. So what do you, how are you pulling it back?
That's why every 80s horror movies has like boobs, you know what I mean?
That was the release.
Yeah. There's always like you're just not going to find a horror movie like that where there isn't like some sort of like, like either this is what's happening. Either kids are bullying someone else, you know what I mean? Like for laughs, or there's like a sex scene or something, and that's like the release. And then of course it's, and they say like, oh, that's the conventions of the horror. If you have sex, you're dead. It's like, no, they were showing boobs to like, you know what I mean? To release the tension of the movie so they can build it back up, throughout,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, and it's like, oh, they're dead, they're dead, but like you said, what's more important is what the audience is going through. You don't care about the characters because they're going to get killed, but now the audience has gotten this, maybe what they came for. I don't know. I mean, maybe they got what they were looking for, but they got to see the the nude scene, and and
they're scared and they got boobs, right? Like,
yeah.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah. you get all kinds of rushes. It's great. No, but that's what it was. I mean, that's because they weren't as sophisticated in writing like real humor. I mean, the horror got obviously more sophisticated in the sense that they became more movies where you have something like Jordan Peele where there's really there are things that are just like fun. Like it's satire really, right? So it's like there's something funny, and there's those releases of like the absurd, and like how absurd this is. And so you get releases like that, which is, there's less about the the sex scene, but it's more about holding up whatever they were trying to, whatever the story they're trying to tell, or whatever they're trying to show. Sorry, cut all that out. Sorry.
No, it was good.
No, because I think that leads to what you're saying, which is, in those moments you can show character flaw or vulnerability or show our humanness, and that can be done in the very tropey, show your boob kind of way, but it also can be done in situational humor or a type of vulnerability that leads them to laugh at themselves, or to find the archetype of the inner fool, for example.
I've always the some of the horror movies that I wrote, I would always say these are people that don't know they're in a horror movie. So so I always looked at the characters like that. I'm like they don't know that, they don't know they're in a horror movie yet, and a lot of them it's always too late. They get picked off before there's any chance of them understanding they're in a horror movie. So trying to write something as grounded and realistic as possible, and then building up that tension, and then they would having that release with either that character gets dispatched, or like we said, there's some situational comedy, there's some good character stuff, or there's boobs.
And I love what you said about that, because then they take that and turn it and use the ring or the collar or whatever, where they find out they're in a horror movie, and then they have all this dread and anxiety, and then they get to play with that ahead of time, so they get to kind of reverse some of the beats, which I think I like. It adds a fresh take on horror, I think.
And that horror of anticipation, once you're in something it's terrifying like that, the ring, having that it's a week or something. Is it a week after you watch
so you have all this, and then we saw a whole bunch of you go on and on about all the ones that start stealing that, right, as basically formatting. But you can see why, because humans so get that. We all have that. That's what you were talking about with the Brooklyn movie. you started to worry. We're like innate worriers.
Oh,
like
yeah,
things are going well, something has to go wrong. You know?
Oh yeah. No, I always like, I always joke that, like, everything is like, like my wife is the best and my kids are great. I'm like, I feel like I'm in the first act of like a revenge thriller. You know what I mean? Like, and like, I'm just like waiting. I'm like, what's gonna, like, so it's always funny because like you're, when you're like completely neurotic, you're like, just terrified that something's gonna happen somewhere. So
And what this conversation also reminds me, like we talk about the viewer or the reader's emotional journey being more important. And also with the movie Brooklyn and some other, it got me thinking about like, this sometimes when you go and you watch a movie or you see something and your expectations are that you're going to see a movie that is a romantic comedy, or you're going to see a horror movie, or going to see something else. And then you get there and you watch it and you're like, that is not the movie I thought I was seeing.
mm-hmm.
And it's so hard sometimes, even if the movie is good, you like, for me personally, the one I'm thinking about was a Robert Pattinson movie called Remember Me, which I went to and I saw with my roommate on like the last day of us rooming together before I moved out of a city. And we thought it was like this romantic comedy and we were going to go like hang out, have this good old time, one last time for the road kind of thing.
Is that the movie with the twist, with the very crazy twist? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what the twist is, reader or listeners. It's that it's 9/11.
Oh,
and
shit.
people like, it's a drama and it's sad and it's like people die.
But the whole movie leads up to it. And then you realize like it lands like on the morning of September 11th. And you're like, oh, like this just took a turn. Yeah.
Well, and there was it wasn't like it was romantic comedy the whole movie and then a turn. It was like there was no romantic comedy. There was romance, but it was more of a drama movie, and it wasn't like a happy-go-lucky movie. And I have a hard time with that movie because I think in hindsight that it was good, but I just did not enjoy it at all because my expectations were wildly off, and I was so confused while I was watching it because I'm like, where's the comedy? Why aren't I laughing? What's happened? Oh no. That kind of stuff.
And what's crazy, it's so hard these days to like go into a movie cold, it's like to go in fresh. I get like the screeners like for voting and stuff. So a lot of times you'll get it used to be like you'd get screeners for movies you've absolutely never heard of, and because they're not going to be out for months, and the box is just like a sleeve, right? It's just a sleeve with like the name. There's no pictures. You don't know who's in it. You don't know anything. It's just the movie. I think now they have who would be nominated, like best actor and director and all that stuff. But so that was like one of the times that like I would go into movies completely cold. Like one of the screeners that we got, I think was Love Actually. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't even know. We didn't like, I had no idea what it was.
You'd be so confused.
Yeah, you're like, what is this? Like, I don't have any idea. And then you watch and you're like, oh, well, that was cute. You know what I mean? Like, but I mean, I know people like, there's like some backlash on Love. I mean, there are creepy parts and stuff, but whatever. But it was like going into the movie just completely cold, like having no clue. But now it's like.
You never go into a movie cold now.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No. Sometimes you'll get like an indie movie that you're like, oh, I've never heard of this. And then it's like, it's really, really, it becomes something, but
yeah. The average person, they go to a movie, they're like, they've seen an ad for it. They've read like a thing. They've looked it up on the theater's website. They've read the little synopsis, movie art, right?
Talk with their husband about which one they're going to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, what are you in the mood for? Like, oh, I want to see this. I want to see that.
Yeah.
So back in college, I said I worked for DreamWorks, and we did like the marketing stuff. Like, I would go to I was in New Jersey. So I worked in New York there, but I was in New Jersey. So I would go and cover all of these theaters and show movies that at the mall, you want to see a free movie? They hand out tickets. They oh, come see a free movie.
That happened. I've never been that lucky.
Oh, really? Oh, but they were like, oh, it's going to be coming out in a few months, and it's by this and that, and you get to sign a release and all that. They used to do it all the time by us, and So I would do that. And the one movie that I brought to this like movie theater, like this mall that I was like running the screening, really I just like sat and watched it. I didn't really do anything, but I'll say I was running the screening because I was the only person of, from the company that was there. Of course, I was an intern working for free. And it was for Gladiator, and
Oh,
so we sat in, and I was like, and I did it for Gladiator and American Beauty and
Whoa, that's
a
one
few other
going
ones,
cold.
but like going in completely cold, and you're like, what is this? Like, what's happening? And then you're like, oh, okay, this is crazy. So it's like, having that experience of going in cold is pretty fantastic, but also like you don't know what to expect, so
Especially American Beauty, my God.
yeah, it has a lot of stuff that you weren't expecting.
Strong digestion for that one.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last time I went into a movie cold was I had some friends who were like, we're going to go see a midnight showing of this movie called The Room. And I was like, what is it?
Oh my gosh.
Yep. And I was like, what is it? And they're like, you've never seen it? And I'm like, no, I've never seen it. I don't know what this is. And they're like, come to this thing, come to this midnight showing with us. And I was like, okay. And they wouldn't tell me what it is.
Oh my God.
And I decided to not look it up. And that's the last time I saw a movie cold.
And you were
confused.
You were not rewarded for it.
No.
I got hit, there's spoons flying everywhere. And I was like, what? Okay.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Great times.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
I love how we kind of talked about like linking all the ideas together, but I want to like go back to the My Name is Earl thing about how like sometimes we as authors have this expectation that what we're writing is original. And then when we're met with the fact that it's not as original as we thought, or there's something else like out there like it, or it's got, so I just finished a chariot racing book and I was all excited. Thought I did my research, and then Molly's like, yeah, there's a YA one that's pretty similar. And it ended up being different enough, but I remember being like, oh, I shouldn't even query this because it's so close, and like it has that deflated feel. And so I just kind of wanted to end by we like to give our listeners homework. Teresa does this, not me, but I miss her so much that I'm doing this in honor of Teresa. She's our other semi-sage. But I want to know if our Discord writers, what ideas they have had or have, and then the movies or books that came out that were
eerily similar.
Yeah, like so too close for comfort maybe.
Yeah, that's great. So if you're listening, comment on this, comment on our Discord, or send us an email at semisages@gmail.com.
Yeah, because I think that's a big aha moment as we were both talking. And I was thinking about when I was a little girl and my dad's like, here, have some milk. And so I took a drink and it was lemonade. And it was really traumatizing for me.
That's also very mean.
Okay, so this same story, right? I was camping with my family and my dad told me to like grab something out of the cooler for him. And I thought it was a soda and I just cracked it. I was like 12, cracked it open, took a nice big chug of what I thought was like root beer, or it was beer. Yeah. And I was like spitting it out. Everyone was like, oh yeah, no. Yeah, it's just not what you're expecting is not what you get sometimes.
But that helps me as a writer realize I don't always need to be so cryptic or so subtle. Like it's okay to hit those beats that people are expecting, right? You don't have to do it in a way that everybody else has done. But in some ways that might be better than here, have some milk and it's lemonade, like that. I think there's real trauma in that,
Well, I think it's also important to say that if there are ideas floating out there that do seem similar to yours, like, well, I always took it as, well, maybe I'm on the right track. Like maybe like my brain is tuned in, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm on the right track, and that's great, but also there's a thing where you have an idea and it's very similar to something else, but it's like, how is mine different? Like, and the bones might be the same. Like it might be that same core idea, and maybe like thematically there's like you're going to touch on similar things, but it's like, but as a writer and your voice, how is it going to be different? Like I know that like I have like another friend who's like, if they were writing, we were writing the same idea, like I know it could be the same log line, you know, and I just know that it would be so
Wildly
completely different, like so completely. So it's like, if there is something like that, it's like, okay, well, how would this be? Like, how would this be like my story? What would I do to make it different? Like, what would I do? You know, because it's in TV, especially, it's always, and novels, it's always about the characters. You know what I mean? It's about the characters. Like, what am I going to, how can I inform these characters in a certain way that this is going to feel undeniably original? You know, even if it is about, you know, a volcano that's, you know, that's about to go off, or it's about some natural disaster, or, it's always about, you know, about the characters. And it's like, what are you bringing to the table? Like, what are you doing that's different? How are you making it special? Like when you go out and pitch a TV show, everybody always wants you to start with, why are you writing this? Like, why do you, you know, like, what is it? What's the personal connection? Like, why are you telling this story? Like, that's what they want to know. They want to know why you're the one telling the story. Why are we hearing this right now? Like, what's the connection? Like, what's going to just drive you to keep this up? Is it, you know, it's not because, you know, you want to like make money, you know what I mean? There's always like some, you know, you can always find some, like, I always find all of my stories come from like my childhood, you know, like they come from a certain relationships and people, and in my childhood that are just mine, you know what I mean? They're so originally mine that like, and I know everyone had a childhood, but like this combination of crazy characters that I grew up with and like, and am related to, like, I'll always bring that to the table, and it will always make everything just a little different than everybody else's, no matter what.
Which is that age old, you know, that's so important piece of advice that we've been giving forever, which is write what you know.
Yeah. And even if those feelings are harsh.
Yeah, which is so interesting, because the book I'm writing now was definitely the book I never wanted to write because it was too close to home and it brought my pain.
All right. So if you have, again, listeners, if you're having this aha moment with the rest of us where it's, you know, write what you know, maybe your story is uniquely yours. Again, please let us know, connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you liked this episode, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, give it a 5-star review. It helps people find us, or also just tell Stephen Lancellotti how wonderful it is that he was here. And thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Really, I learned a ton.
This has been so incredible. And if you want to learn more about Stephen, you can find links to his work on our webpage at semistagesofthepages.com. And is there any projects you want to pitch or anything you want to tell our listeners about how they can find you besides that?
Yeah. Well, if on Instagram, but I only post pictures of pizza because I just so there's literally just there's nothing on there very interesting except for pizza. But yeah, no, I'm currently working on a few different things that I can't talk about, but you know,
we'll hold our breath.
Yeah,
we'll be excited.
I'll let you know when they don't go forward. No, I'm just kidding.
When they do, will you come back and tell us all about them?
Yeah, this was so fun. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you again. And everyone have a good night.
It said leave meeting. Do you want to leave meeting because they're recording? And I'm like, okay, night.